Okay, welcome back. We're using Visio to create a crow's foot notation. So I need to be able to draw a line between these two guys. So the way I do it is perhaps a little weird, but just bear with me. I'm going to grab this relationship guy, and I'm just going to drag and drop him onto the design surface. Okay? I don't immediately try to attach it to an object. That's a little complicated for me. So now I just want to grab this end, and I'm going to just, it'll snap. See the little green thing? And I grab this part and I put it over here and it kind of snaps into place. Isn't that pretty cool? Okay. Now the problem is, first of all, the dang thing is so tiny. I can't even see what this is. Is this a one-to-many? I can't tell. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to click on it to highlight it. And then I'm going to go in here where it says line. Okay. And go in here where it says weight. And I'm going to make it a lot bigger. You know, like that. Something I can look at and go, ah, okay. So it's saying that an order has multiple customers. Is that right? I mean, when I just dragged and dropped this thing on here. So I need to be able to change both ends of this. Okay? So I click on this guy and I say, what's the beginning symbol? So the beginning symbol, first of all, which one is the beginning one? Which one is the ending one? You know, if you just drag it onto the surface, the beginning one is the one at the top. Okay, so I want that. A customer has more than one order. So here's a good question. Does the customer have to have an order? I mean, technically you could say, well, you're not a customer of mine because you never ordered anything. That's a reasonable thing to do. That's something that you would ask the guy. This is the whole purpose of the database model, and say, does a customer have to have an order to be in the table? Because they may say, oh no, I mean, we hire people to go out and dream up customers, so we go ahead and put it in our database. They just haven't ordered anything yet. And you go, ah, okay. So what I need here is I need something like this. I need a one-to-many. All right, let's get the many side. So the end symbol is one or more. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So now, do I have my minimum cardinality right? I just told you. So a customer must have an order and an order may have a customer? No, that's exactly backwards. I just told you that the customer may be in the database but hasn't ordered anything yet. So that means the mandatory optional is on the other side. Remember the far side? Okay? And an order clearly has to be assigned to a customer. You can't have an order without a customer. So I've got the minimum cardinalities wrong. All right, let's go back and do this again. So for the ending symbol, okay, ending symbol, I want 0 or more. And for the beginning symbol, I want 1 and only 1. Well, yeah, okay. So now, the way you read this is a customer may have an order, but an order must have one and only one customer. Okay, making sense? Okay, let's just continue. I'm going to add another one. So I'm going to go down here and grab me another entity, and I'm going to call this one order detail. Because a single order, right, when you order from Amazon, I don't know, you're ordering kumquats and Beanie Babies. You don't have to do 2 orders, do you? You can just do 1 order that has multiple items in it. Okay, good. So I'm going to need, I'm going to have something from the order. So I'm going to have to have a primary key here, order ID, and then some way of picking out which one of the lines it is. So I use a thing called line number. Okay, that's what I do. And then, you know, whatever it is you're ordering, you know, like the item ID or something, you know, unit price and all the rest of that stuff. And there's a lot of details here I'm not putting in. So here, in order for a single order can have multiple items in it, I'm going to have this guy as part of a compound primary key. Okay? Do you see why? Because a single order could have multiple lines, and therefore that would by itself would not be unique. And this part is going to be the foreign key going back up. Okay, so that key is participating in both a compound primary key and the foreign key. All right, let's try this again. I'm going to drag this guy. This is the beginning symbol, so I'm just going to attach that thing to here. I'm going to go down to here and attach that guy to there. And once again, I'm going to have to go here and go to the little weights and make this thing visible so I can actually see the dang thing. And boy, oh boy, did it pick wrong. So an order must have at least one, but more than one, most likely. So this part down here needs to be a mandatory mini, because you can't have an order without ordering anything. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's do that. So I want one or more. Okay, but an order detail should go back to exactly one order, never two. And clearly it has to. You can't have order detail floating around. So that's going to be a one mandatory. So let's do this. Right click. So one mandatory. So which one is one mandatory? By the way, in Visio they use the numeric thing. That's why we showed you both techniques. Okay, so we just built a crow's foot notation using Visio. All right, the things you need to learn is dragging and dropping custom entities, double clicking on a column to type in the stuff. Clearly, if I need to add something under here, I just do a right click and it says insert before or after, right? You know, like putting in the address or something like that. Cool, right? All right, so this is how it's done. Dragging and dropping this thing on there. The top one is the beginning, and this is the end one. Okay, I'm just going to hit undo there. And then I always make them thicker because I can't see them. And then I'm going to hit save. Woohoo! Okay, so this is remarkably similar to an upcoming homework requirement where you're going to have to take a database design and build a Visio entity relationship diagram out of this. Okay, good. Okay. So going back to the figures, just to make sure you got everything perfectly squared here. Reading employee must have a skill. And then a skill might have an employee. It is possible to have a skill on the books with no employee. But you can't have an employee with no skills. Otherwise, why the heck did you hire them? Okay? So reading right to left, left to right, it's always the far one. That's what you need to remember. Okay? Good. All right. So on page 228, they start talking about entity types. Now, they're going to use an awful lot of words here. Okay? And so I try my best to make, so you don't have to memorize a bunch of stuff. But just bear with me. Some of these things are just going to have to, maybe you don't have to memorize them, but you need to be able to go to find them rather quickly. So there's a thing called a strong entity. Okay, a strong entity is one of those things that typically can stand by itself. And so of this, one way to determine whether or not you have a strong entity is that there are no foreign keys in it. That's a good clue. So this has a foreign key, so that's probably not a strong entity. And that has a foreign key, and it's probably not a strong entity. But customer doesn't have any foreign keys, so it probably is a strong key. That's not a perfect rule, but it's an easy one to kind of sort of remember. So an employee, yeah, that exists all by itself, right? A customer, yes, those exist all by themselves. A weak entity basically means it can't really survive without other parts. In other words, you can't really even have an order without having order details. And you can't really have an order without having a customer, right? And so that's considered a weak entity. Okay. So strong entities are easy to spot. For example, in assignment 3, I mentioned that in the help hints file that that I see a student strong entity and I see a professor strong entity. So those are like easy to spot and easy to work out for. I usually start with the strong entities first because there's no complication. So get those out of the way. Okay, so the next one is what's called an ID dependent weak entity. Okay, now this is going to take a little bit of explanation, so just bear with me. So I have a building and an apartment inside the building. Okay, so I have a painting, and then I have a copy of the painting, and then I have a patient, and then I have an exam. So the building is a strong entity, wouldn't you think? And a painting is a strong entity, and a patient is a strong entity. But these guys, the apartments inside, The apartment would never exist if the building didn't exist, right? You can't have a copy of a painting if the painting doesn't exist, okay? And you can't have an exam for a patient that doesn't exist unless you're trying to build Medicare. So these are ID-dependent weak entities, the bottom ones. These guys are the strong entities. These guys are the weak entities. Okay? Okay. Okay, I'll admit the term is strange, ID-dependent weak entity, but come on, guys. It's not that bad. Okay, so let's continue. The way they describe it is, it's about the existence. That's the term they use. I just basically say, if the parent did not exist, would you have this thing? And the answer is, if the answer is no, without a building, you would not have an apartment inside the building. Okay, then that's definitely it. Okay. There's another one where you could just say it logically depends on the parent. So the FK is maybe not all that obvious, but in this particular case, it's fairly obvious that this building name is the foreign key. I mean, they don't actually say that, but you can look at it and tell. And this painting name is the foreign key pointing up to the top. So it's very common that a ID-dependent weak entity is going to have a compound primary key with one of the keys being a foreign key. Yeah, that's an easy thing to remember, I think. Okay? All right. So there's another way of looking at this. This one is a little bit more complicated because this one is a manufacturer and model. So I have a Toyota Celica, and it's got a description and a number of passengers and blah, blah, blah. And this is my specific Toyota Celica. Okay? So I use the manufacturer and model, and I have to add my VIN number in here, my manufacturing sequence number, and then I get all the rest of this stuff. Okay? So this still is ID dependent because I have a foreign key that points back up. Okay? I have manufacturer and model that points back up. But here's a non-ID dependent. Again, don't get hung up on the wording here. All this means is it's dependent, but there is no foreign key that points back up. At least not an obvious one. So here's the thing. If it's ID dependent, the foreign key is already there. All you have to do, like in Visio, is to go up there and go click, click, and turn them on to foreign keys, and you're done. But here's a non-ID dependent, but still a weak entity. But there's no foreign key that's obvious, and you're probably going to have to add one to be able to pull this off. Okay, one more time. ID dependent, the foreign keys are already there. You just need to designate them. Non-ID, the foreign keys are not there, and you're probably going to have to add them. So there's nothing in here that makes this make sense. I'm going to have to add something to vehicle to be able to make it come back to the auto model. Okay. Okay. So here's kind of a summary of those guys. I'm not certain if this is actually going to help any. I'm being serious, guys. I'm not certain. A weak entity is an entity whose existence depends on another. ID dependent is a weak entity whose identifier includes the identifier of another entity. That's an easy way of saying that there's a compound primary key, one of which is a foreign key. An identifying relationships are used to represent, and some entities are weak but not ID. Using data modeling tools, they're shown with a non-identifying relationship with separate documentation indicating that they're weak. Don't worry about that. We're not going to do that. Okay, so why are we doing this? Well, there's two reasons. If you see a ID-dependent, foreign keys are already there. If you don't, you're going to have to add one. And what do you add? And how do you add it? All that stuff. So it's all about your duties. Your duties are simple, or my duties are complex. That's the difference. Okay, I'm going to skip a bunch of the subtypes and supertypes stuff in the book. I find that not very useful. And let's go down to the summary of the crow's foot notation. All right, now they make a distinction between identifying and non-identifying. I'm not going to do that. So they use dash lines and solid lines. I'm not going to ask you to do that at all. Okay, to me, from a modeling perspective, we don't need that. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.